Page 196 of The Unfolding is the story of Ryan Senters.
As I started to pursue God and reorient my mind to that, my interest starts to change. Getting drunk, partying, that was just not my life anymore. When I'm serving the hurting and these kids, I am like so close to Jesus. It's like I'm looking in the eyes of Christ.
God's story has been unfolding.
Since the beginning of time.
He invites you to be a part of it.
Wow. Another page in The Unfolding.
Hi, this is Meredith Foster. Hanai, it's a Hawaiian term for adopted or chosen family, and it's a really good way to describe Ryan and Sara Senters. When Ryan was younger, he was all about chasing significance, but then God gripped his heart, especially for vulnerable kids. In their 17 years of marriage, Ryan and Sara have been parents to 11 kids, 2 biological and 9 foster kids they've adopted. But their passion, their willingness to trust God has led them on a wild journey of faith. Their story is so remarkable. People Magazine and CBS Morning News both featured their family just this week. Ryan and Sara never imagined they'd be parents to 11 or help provide family for hundreds more. But once they heard God's call on their lives, they couldn't look back.
As I think about my faith journey, I was raised by a single mom for most of my life. She got me connected with church on an occasion as she was trying to figure out her own faith and raising my sister and I and kind of navigating through that. But it was really hit or miss in that. My dad was inactive in my life for most of it. So that really impacted me in a lot of ways of trying to figure out who I was, trying to figure out my identity and self. And I was always trying to pursue something. And I was pretty empty and just trying to go through the motions.
So faith for you wasn't necessarily a real fulfilling thing at that stage in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely was on a journey of like, I was so hungry for something, but I never think I found it. I went to a youth camp with one of my high school friends and I encountered Jesus in a profound way, but it kind of like, it was planted, but then it kind of faded away. Mm-hmm. I went to college and went to Northern Arizona University. As I was up there, I was just trying to find significance and trying to find like what makes me happy. So for me, at first it was like, I searched unhealthy relationships. I was part of a fraternity and I was in charge of all the parties.
You were the social guy, huh?
I was the vice president of recruitment. So I was the social one and made sure I had fun and I had the house that everyone wanted to be a part of. So for me, that was like, I thought at first I have the ability to be able to gather people and help people to be able to have a good time. And I definitely used that to my advantage when I was in college. What I noticed is that as I was pursuing all of that, it never really fulfilled. I kept striving for more and for something, and it just never left me more empty. I remember my junior year of college. This is before I met my wife. We also met in college in my junior year. But I went to a whitewater rafting trip with a bunch of my fraternity brothers. And we went rafting, it's saved up. Everyone is so excited for this trip. Everyone's partying and having fun. And I just feel so empty. I remember walking down the Colorado River. All my friends are having a great time. And I just feel like I am totally alone. And it probably sounds melodramatic. But for me, in that moment, as a young person, I was like, from the world, it looks like I have everything. I have full ride scholarship. I have all these friends. I have a girlfriend that cares about me. But there was something missing. And I remember walking, I had that Walkman that had the tape player around it or the CD player that you could push anti-skip for so long. And I had like a 30-second anti-skip on that. And I had like an old Jars of Clay album I remember listening to.
Wow.
So it was very 90s. Mm-hmm. And I remember just, God, if you are real, I knew you were real, but if I cannot do this anymore. It was like a moment of surrender. I started getting involved in a college group there. I met my wife. We were working together at an after-school program. By God's grace, she loved Jesus more than I did. Huh. And she actually helped kind of spur that on. God is so faithful in that. Like, I surrender, and then what does a young man need in that moment? Like, he needs like people around him that can help point you to the right way.
Wow. That's really cool.
Were you a pretty different person to go from the party planner and then to you're the guy working at the after school program? Were you really different? Were people around you going like, what's going on?
I think actually people started to watch me disengage from that life. I still had a relationship. Many of the people were actually in my wedding, but they watched my life start to change. I think many times in faith, and at least for me, it's not like a quick, like automatic thing. There was definitely a heart thing, but like walking out of life. And as I started to pursue God and reorient my mind to that and to what Jesus wanted for my life and walking in line with that, like my interest starts to change. Like getting drunk and partying, that was just not my life anymore. There was something so much more. And I found like a purpose and significance of one of my faith. I was always working with kids in after school program. And then I also started working in a shelter for kids in the foster care system in prison. And I did an internship there, and I worked with these young kids who just had so much hurt and pain. I remember working with a young man who just got out of juvenile detention. I was doing life skills with the kid, and he was so mad and frustrated. And he just kind of blew up at me, almost punched me. And I moved my head just slightly. His fist went through the wall. I was like, oh, wow, I almost got a black eye there. But minutes later, he ended up breaking down crying because lost his mom, his dad's in prison, and a kid's anger was just masking deep pain and deep hurt. And for me, I was like, I can give my life to this. To serve and to help other people is way more purposeful and gives me way more joy than simply just pursuing success, prestige, being popular. And I was like, all right, I think I found the thing that deeply fulfills and points me to a purpose that is beyond myself.
So what did you see yourself doing? Now, I know just from what I've read about you, you're very entrepreneurial, and I assume that's always been the case. What did you think you were going to do?
Yeah, I knew that I loved Jesus. I knew my wife and I were getting married. I was getting a master's in counseling. I thought that was going to be it. I was on a road of like, I was willing to try anything. So I ended up working with kids. I thought I was going to be a teacher. I tried a variety of different things. But for me, after my wife and I got married, we moved back down to Phoenix, and I was just trying to figure out what the heck to do with my life. I ended up volunteering at a local church. Long story short, the volunteer becomes the youth pastor. I thought I was just gonna be a part-time gig, and ended up like developing this hunger and intensity for God's word, for developing kids, my party skills to help get young people to like party for Jesus. It worked out pretty good. So I could see how my personality and my temperament and ability to sell things could be a positive thing, but helping people find their passion in Jesus was definitely an amazing opportunity. And my wife ended up us working together. We always knew, even back in the day when I was working with that shelter, that I was always called to help the hurting kid. And I always thought I'm going to be like, I always like had a heart for like, I don't know where it came from, but probably that shelter experience of being a foster parent. And I knew that like kids need a strong influence in their life, a positive influence. I saw that how it helped me. And my dad not necessarily being around, I was like, all right, these kids need like a father figure, someone that can invest in them and be in their corner. We knew that being foster adopted parents would be a core part of our life. So as we now look forward, married 17 years, have 11 kids, 9 of them adopted out of foster care system. We started a foster care agency or restaurants for kids that do work programs for foster kids. Like that's our life. And I never could have seen that happen if I did not reorient myself that I need Jesus to be my king.
So when you made that surrender and switch, and now you're pursuing different things and you have this passion. So did you start off youth pastoring? How did the trajectory go from there? Because where you are now is a long way from youth pastoring.
Yeah, I did youth pastoring for about 6 to 8 years. My pastor at the time said, hey, you need to get some like seminary training. Went to seminary for a while. I was doing that while pastoring. I thought I was going to church plant. I went to India and had this kind of revealing experience as I was serving like the orphan. There was an orphanage there, and these kids just have nothing. And they're just these delegates in a community where they have very, very little. They're having to work in the rice fields just to make $1 a day. They're not able to go to school, and at one point we were feeding them and we ran out of eggs and the kids are just fighting over the food. And it was just heartbreaking. And for me, when I came back from that experience, I looked at my own life and I was like entertaining kids. I felt like as a youth pastor, I was doing the best events possible. But when I looked at these orphans and looked at the least of these in India, it felt like I was looking in the eyes of Christ. What I noticed is that like when I'm serving the hurting and these kids and the least of these, I am like so close to Jesus. It's like I'm looking in the eyes of Christ. Becoming a youth pastor, I ended up church planting in the inner city of Phoenix for 4 years. I worked with tons of kids and I ended up just loving the kids and young people and work with kids as single moms. We ended up starting a shelter for single moms. So the church plant ended up becoming a full-on nonprofit. And then my wife and I, at that point, had several kids of our own and had several foster kids that were like, all right, how do we make a living for our own family too, but also be able to like do the work that God's called us to? Mm-hmm. So we started Ohana, which is our foster care agency. We took our home that we had 4 kids under 4.
Those are your kids?
My kids. At this point, we had 4 kids under 4, 2 were adopted, 2 biological. I mean, there's a million stories to talk about with my foster kids. Our first adopted son came into our home and we always had a name picked out. And if we ever had a son, his name was going to be Gavin and his middle name was going to be Thomas, like mine. And he comes into our home after a traumatic brain injury from the hospital. He comes to our house and his first name is Gavin. We're like, huh. And then his last name was Thomas. And then a year later, his mom, who struggled with mental health stuff, asked us to adopt him. And the whole time it's like God knew that this kid was supposed to be my son. His name was already chosen deep into our heart and God brought him. So in 2015, we had 4 kids under 4. I was working in homes with kids in foster care system and there was a 14-year-old girl. My wife and I took her in and ended up adopting her at age 16. So we had a teenager as well. We're like, our house is full and maxed out. No more in the Senters home, but we wanted to still work in the foster care world. So we took our house that we raised all our kids in and turned it into a group home, got a license by the state, developed a business plan, worked with getting connections with and getting all that going. It took like a year. And in 2016, we opened up Ohana. 10 kids move in, 10 boys, and our life's never been the same since.
It seems to me you're not afraid to jump in if you feel like God's calling you to something. I think that's fascinating. Is it just something that you've found God's faithful, so you're not afraid to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty risk tolerant. My love language is action, I guess. I love to be able to try new things. Just sitting on the sidelines for me is like very anxiety producing, I guess. I've watched that so many young people and volunteers that I've worked with and people want to do something, but there's so much fear around it. Mm-hmm. There is beauty in just like stepping out and it's very inspiring to other people and people just want to be invited in to try it. Like, and I've had a lot of failures. I always tried to be a manager of a Christian band. That was a total swing and a miss. We made, for my youth group, we sewed Capri Suns that were cut open and we learned how to sew. We sewed them into little bags and sold them out. We made hundreds of dollars to build a well in India. So, some don't work, but then out of God's grace, a lot of them do.
Wow. I love that because I think fear and anxiety is a big thing for lots of people.
What I've been doing a lot of thinking of recently is that sometimes anxiety at least brews in my head when I'm thinking about myself too much. When I'm thinking about my own emotions, when I'm thinking about my own circumstances, anxiety brews. And I think that's for everybody. The more we think about ourselves and our circumstances, there are moments in my life that I had no control. Things that happened early in my life, no control. And like, I could honestly think of myself as not just a victim, but stuck. Mm-hmm. But when I am helping a kid and watching their life change or investing in one of my staff, like I'm outside myself and it's like, it helps me put in perspective my own life and faith. Like God is bigger than me, that the circumstances that my life are, like God can turn any of that into good. So I just need to be faithful to that.
As Ryan kept focusing on the needs of kids and God's heart to help them, It only fueled his compassion and entrepreneurial spirit even more.
That thing that you mentioned when you were in India, where you just felt like so close to God, like Jesus was there, even though it was such a desperate situation. Do you find that replicated in a way, as you're working with kids, foster kids?
Yeah, I honestly do. Last week, I was in one of our homes working with these 3 boys, and they were struggling of just like managers needed support to help them. Like these boys were tough and have like they're young, 10, 12-year-old boys, but they just been hurt a lot. And just even getting them to do daily chores is a challenge. So I go in there and I'm showing them how to do your chore, how to do things fully, and like, hey, put some elbow grease into this. This is your room. You got to have pride in this. They're getting all excited and fired up. And for me, having a chance to hang out with them and then go throw football at the end of the day, that's so simple, but actually so significant. Like I doing something for one kid that you wish you could do for everybody, and helping them just be seen and know, and they learn like hard work. They learn that, hey, take pride in your stuff, take pride in how God created you. When I do that, it's like I'm serving them, but I'm also like giving them pride of who they are created in Christ.
There probably are people listening who are not aware of the situation of foster care in the United States. I mean, can you just give some perspective of why you decided to start the group home?
So yeah, there is 10,000 foster kids in Arizona alone. So if I try to do that out within the country, that's hundreds of thousands of kids. Most kids who go into foster care system, it's no fault of their own. It's the reason that someone that their parents couldn't provide for them, either neglect or abuse, something traumatic has happened. That's most of the reasons. There are times when kids have other challenges the parents can't provide for them. So then the state gets involved to provide a safe and stable home. And so for us, when we started Ohana, I was working with these kids who have had traumatic experiences, many times abuse. These homes that I would go into, it just felt like an institution. Like they're just being housed. And kids need family. So Ohana means family. Family means no one's left behind. So for me, I wanted to create a sense of family for these kids that they could go on a family vacation. Like when my mom was single mom, she was able to bust her butt to make sure that we went at least camping. And these kids deserve that. They deserve to see the ocean. I played rec sports and I was terrible, but you know what? It gave me confidence, and these kids deserve that too. So for us, we started Ohana, and God has just honestly blessed it. And now we're like at 40 homes all over Arizona. Yes. And serve over 500 kids. It's crazy.
This has happened in the last
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah. 2016 to now. So yeah, 8 years.
It's incredible. I love Ohana. No one's left behind, and that idea of family. Do you think any of that goes back to your childhood of like, well, I wish my dad was here as a part of it? Or do you know?
Totally. Yeah. I think the need for safe, loving adults who will engage with you and just be around, especially for all these boys. Like mostly it's these women who are these caretakers for these, and it's so good and needed. But there's a lot of times when a kid is 12-year-old boy, they need like a man to show them what it means to be a man, and how to step up and how to start moving towards like adulthood. So that was part of it. Our second adopted son, his name is Drew. He came into our home. He was meth exposed, and he was like a wild terrorist child. We called him Stitch from the movie Lilo and Stitch. Mm-hmm. Stitch from that movie, he was this orphan alien. And what he was like is he was a terror. He ran around, destroyed everything. He was a destroyer, but also a lover. And our son, the whole time, it was a 3-year adoption for him. It took a long time. We called him Stitch his whole life. So for us, that movie Lilo and Stitch was so significant in our adoption journey and creating family. So now we are so embedded, like that is our heartbeat. Like we tell our family and we have an Ohana love. Like no matter how long someone's with us, that we have an Ohana love, that they're part of our family, that it's a chosen family. A chosen family is sometimes way more significant than your blood family. Honestly, it's like, this is the thing, like God has woven us together, and we are going to be a part of each other's stories forever.
I love that. When we're in the middle of something hard, we don't see it or understand how it's possible, but God's always taking some of the worst junk we go through and redeeming it in beautiful ways. And so I just love to think about, I've no doubt that there were parts of your childhood that were really challenging, but how God created a tenderness in your heart towards kids because you've been through it, and it's being redeemed over and over and over again with every child that gets impacted. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think I look at every one of my kids that we've adopted, looking at on my desk now, like my 13-year-old son, we adopted just this last year. It's been a huge transition for us. We had 2 adult kids. We had 4 kids in our home. Life was pretty good. Ohana was growing. We are enjoying being parents. And in one of our group homes, there was a sibling group of 5 kids, and ages 2 to 13. They've been in the group home for 2 years, and they had no family. And we wanted to so badly keep these kids together. And the reality is there's very few people that could take in 5 kids. So we knew that the 2-year-old's going to get separated from the 12-year-old. Kids are resilient, but like they should be together. So we prayed. They came up to Flagstaff. They saw the snow for the first time like a year and a half ago. And my wife was like, if there's any way we could do something for these kids. And that weekend, I remember being up all night on my knees praying. And I've never done that. I'm not like all night. I sleep like a baby. And I was up all night because I did not want to start over with the 2-year-old. But God was saying, go.
Wow.
And that weekend, we decided that we're going to sell our house, find a new house that we could move in 5 kids and go from 4 to 9. So we decided this in December. By March, we were licensed again and the kids moved in. And now they've had their year anniversary. We took them to Hawaii this last year. They went on their first airplane trip. We thought it was going to be their adoption vacation. They should be adopted later this year. But these kids are just thriving, amazing kids. And our family is Ohana, and it's so complete with them. And we can't even imagine not having them around and watching these kids' stories unfold. My 14-year-old, he knew nothing about Jesus, knew nothing. He started going to church with us when he first moved in. We talked about Jesus. We do our little family devotion on Sundays and talk about one of our core values, and never knew how to pray, none of that. Got baptized over the summer, and last weekend I go to his basketball game for his 8th grade year, and he's at a school and they pray before a game, and I walk in and I see him with the microphone, and he's holding it, and in front of all of these kids, he is giving this prayer, thanking Jesus for his life and for this opportunity. I was holding back tears. That, and watching his faith become so alive, is the legacy that I want to live. And that's the life I want to have.
And you are, and you're living it. What do you know about God today that you didn't know when you walked down to the Colorado River that day and you surrendered to him?
It's a good question. That he shows up every time. It's like that surrender moment, like my hands are open, like, Lord, may you increase, may I decrease. Like that is a real thing. And that's a really hard thing. But it's like when I have done that, I have way more fulfillment. It's like, I didn't know that is the faith journey. Does that make sense? Like having surrendering is letting my own self be less and letting Jesus be more. That is where I find fulfillment. And it's not it's not money. It's not like success. It's not the degree. It's not the friends and the party boy. It's none of that. It's none of that. It's like knowing that he is Lord and I am not. And honestly, that is a very, very comforting thing for me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Like, wow.
What would you say to someone whose heart is drawn towards fostering kids, but they're afraid?
I say, me too. I would say this is the best and hardest thing you'll ever do. Then you don't have to be the perfect parent. You just have to be present, loving, pray, and step up. Most of these kids are just hurt and have wounds that showing up, you don't need to have all the words to say, but showing up, making dinner, sitting around the table, taking them to like on a little family vacation is so healing. And your life gets better. Like when I invest my life in one of these kids, oh my goodness, they have blessed me more than I probably helped them. They made me more sacrificial, more. I've seen Jesus more through them. My life is full because of them. And I think most people are scared because it's like, what if this doesn't work out? We've had plenty of those fears. And what about my other kids? We've taken in kids older You got to be like wisdom and discernment, and there's professionals that can support you. Like that's good. Like for us, I get inspired for it, but then I'm like, all right, how will this work? Can they share a room? Can I take a kid? What about my kids in my own home? How do I work through that? Those are the questions. And then you get some professionals and agency to help support you and walk you through it. It's figure outable. All of this is figure outable because Jesus is king and these are his kids.
As Ohana kids began aging out of the foster system, Ryan and Sara realized that many of them, especially the ones with special needs, struggled to find jobs. They were moving toward poverty, homelessness. That's when they started Hanai Coffee in Phoenix to provide children with job training and employment. They're planning to open their second Phoenix location soon. So if you're in Phoenix, stop by and have a cup of coffee. Ryan has a passion for helping people build businesses that do well financially and, more importantly, do good for the world. You can learn more about that on his podcast called Unleash Your Purpose. Find it on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. And look for Ryan and Sara and their kids in this week's People magazine. They've got a 4-page spread about them and about Hanai Coffee, and it's really cool. If you want to know more, look for Ryan Senters on Instagram. This week on the Unfolding Facebook page, we asked, why do you listen? And Julie said, every story shows the faithfulness of God. They share the beginning, middle, and end of some hard times. In the midst of hard life struggles, these stories help me to hold on to faith. Julie, that's exactly what we hope for as you listen. Why do you listen to The Unfolding? Share your thoughts with us on our website, wowgod.com. Click on the Unfolding podcast page, and you'll see a green microphone button. Just click, record your story, then send it to me. Would you like to help this kind of inspiring storytelling grow? When you support the Wow God Podcast Network, you allow us to create podcasts where every story gives listeners a chance to say, Wow God. You can make a monthly gift of $40 or a gift of any size at wowgod.com. Thanks to the Unfolding team, Lindsay Caparoon, Michael Shermack, our producer and network director, Jason Rackow. The Unfolding is a Wow God production, a ministry of the University of Northwestern St. Paul. Discover more at wowgod.com. We'll be back next week with another page of The Unfolding.